What if I told you that some of the things you have believed since childhood, the kind of facts that teachers repeated, that TV shows dramatized, and that pop culture made feel absolutely certain, are not true at all? The truth is, humanity loves myths, and not just the ones about gods and heroes. We create modern myths that feel so real they shape how we see the world. Today we're breaking 5 of the most popular myths wide open. By the end, you'll know why they spread, why they stuck, and what the evidence really says. Stick around, because I promise one of these myths will make you question something you were completely sure about just 5 minutes ago. Before we dive in, quick favor. Tap the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which of these myths fooled you the longest. Now let's dig in. Myth number 5. Napoleon was extremely short. Everyone has heard the joke. Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the most feared military leaders in history, was secretly tiny. Napoleon complex even became a phrase we use for short people with big egos. But here's the twist. Napoleon was not especially short. In French measurements at the time, records listed him as 5 feet 2 inches. People ran with that number, thinking he was pocket-sized. But here's the detail almost everyone misses. French feet were longer than English feet. When converted properly, Napoleon was about 5'6" to 5'7" tall, that's roughly 168 to 170 centimeters. Now, was that short? Not really. For men in early 19th century France, that was almost exactly average. Add to this that Napoleon was always surrounded by the tallest, most imposing soldiers he could find for his imperial guard, and suddenly he looked shorter by comparison. And, of course, his British enemies loved to exaggerate his small stature as part of their propaganda. Imagine it, easier to mock him as a little man than respect him as a strategist who nearly conquered Europe. So Napoleon wasn't pint-sized at all. He was just the victim of bad math and Great British trolling. Myth number 4. People in the Middle Ages thought the Earth was flat. This is one of the most persistent myths in history classes. We imagine medieval peasants or church leaders saying, "Sail too far, you'll fall off the edge of the earth." But here is the thing. Almost no educated person in the Middle Ages thought the earth was flat. The truth is, the idea of a round earth goes all the way back to ancient Greece. Philosophers like Aristotle and Pythagoras argued for it, and by the time of the Middle Ages, scholars across Europe knew the earth was a sphere. Sailors could see ships disappear hull first over the horizon. Astronomers tracked the curved shadow of Earth during lunar eclipses. It was obvious. So where did the flat Earth myth come from? In the 19th century, a handful of writers pushed this story to make the Middle Ages look backwards compared to the so-called enlightened modern age. It was a convenient way to say, "Look how far we've come from ignorant peasants to rational thinkers." In reality, Columbus didn't sail to prove the Earth was round. Everyone already knew that. He sailed to prove Asia was closer by sea, and he was wrong about that. So next time you hear people in the Middle Ages believed in a flat Earth, remember, that's the myth. The truth is, they knew better. Myth number 3. Vikings wore horned helmets. Picture a Viking. You probably see a tall bearded warrior in animal furs, carrying a massive axe, and wearing a helmet with 2 big horns curving out like a bull. It's one of the most iconic images of Norse history, and it's completely wrong. There is no archaeological evidence that Vikings wore horned helmets into battle. Helmets from that era that have been found are simple, functional, and definitely horn-free. So where did the idea come from? Blame the 19th century. Romantic artists and, more importantly, costume designers for Wagner's operas about Norse gods and heroes decided that horns looked dramatic on stage. It made their Viking characters more recognizable and menacing under the lights. The image stuck in popular culture and eventually became truth in people's minds. But imagine fighting with horns on your helmet. They'd catch on weapons, doors, or even each other. In a real battle, they'd be a disadvantage. Vikings were practical. They didn't need horns to terrify their enemies. Their longships arriving out of the mist did that job just fine. So, next time you see a horned Viking helmet, know it belongs in opera houses and cartoons, not history. Myth number 2. Einstein failed math as a child. This myth is one of those inspiring stories people tell, to make struggling students feel better. The idea goes, even Albert Einstein, the greatest genius of the modern era, failed math when he was young. So don't worry about your grades, you could still change the world. But the truth is, Einstein was excellent at math from a young age. By 15, he was already mastering calculus. What really happened is this. As a teenager, Einstein transferred to a different school system. The grading scales were different. In his old school, a 1 might have been the highest grade. In his new school, a 6 was the top grade. At some point, people misread the records, saw that Einstein had a 1, and assumed he was failing. In reality, he was excelling. So why does this myth stick? Because it's comforting. We love the idea that even geniuses struggled, that they were just like us. And while Einstein wasn't failing math, he did have struggles. He was a rebellious student, he clashed with teachers, and he often felt out of place in formal classrooms. But when it came to math, he was never the underdog. He was the kid blowing past the curriculum. This one is a myth that sounds too good to fact-check, but the truth shows us something else. Genius is complicated, but it doesn't need false stories to inspire. Myth number 1. Humans only use 10% of their brains. This is maybe the most famous science fact that isn't actually a fact. Movies love it. Motivational speakers repeat it. The idea is that humans only use 10% of their brains, and if we could unlock the other 90%, we'd have psychic powers or superhuman intelligence. Sounds exciting, right? But neuroscience says otherwise. Brain imaging scans show that we use nearly every part of our brain, just not all at once. Different regions activate depending on what we're doing, solving math problems, remembering songs, playing sports, or even daydreaming. Over the course of a day, virtually 100% of the brain is active at different times. So, where did the 10% myth start? Some think it began with misquoted psychology research in the early 20th century. Others blame writers who wanted a simple way to say, you have untapped potential. Whatever the origin, the myth exploded because it's hopeful. Who doesn't want to believe they have a hidden genius waiting to be unlocked? But the truth is actually more amazing. The brain is incredibly efficient. Every part has a job, from controlling your heartbeat to processing complex emotions. We don't need hidden powers to be extraordinary, we already are, just by existing. So there you have it, 5 myths you probably thought were true but aren't. Napoleon wasn't short. Medieval people didn't think the earth was flat. Vikings didn't wear horned helmets. Einstein never failed math, and yes, you're using your whole brain right now. What these myths prove is that humans love a good story, even when it's not true. Sometimes it's propaganda, sometimes it's theater, sometimes it's a misread gradebook. But once a myth takes hold, it can last for centuries. So, which of these surprised you the most? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to see how many of you grew up believing in horned Vikings or brain superpowers. And if you love myth-busting journeys like this, make sure you hit subscribe because we've got more mind-twisting stories coming soon. The truth is always stranger and often more interesting than the myth.